issue with the microbiome not being up to scratch because it's not being fed properly. So you have a kind of solution, which is the gut check program, which helps us rebuild the microbiome. So could you talk about kind of what are the principles of the gut check? I mean, there's a lot of detail in the book, so which is great. But yeah, at a high level, what's the kind of principles?
Well, I think one of the things we've learned is that, which again surprises anyone who I tell it to, these bacteria, and depending on who these bacteria are, control our behavior. They control our emotions. They control anxiety, depression, but they also control our food choices. And what's fascinating is what I call bad bugs or gang members uh, love simple sugars, and they have a fancy for saturated fats. And they really can't use complex sugars, complex starches, fibers. They don't have the machinery to use them. And what happens is they direct their host's behavior to find the foods that they want. And is it any wonder that the Western diet is just chock full of simple sugars, simple carbohydrates, and fats, because this is what they're seeking. And people want to shame people. Oh, look at the junk you're eating. That's bad for you. Well, in fact, most people do know it's bad for them. And yet they do it again and again. And one of the things I've talked about in all my books, it's really not your fault. It's their fault. So what happens is that the good guys can't use this stuff. And the good guys are kind of waiting for the stuff that they're used to. Complex carbohydrates, starches, resistant starches, soluble fiber, to get down to them, down to the colon, but it never arrives because our food is devoid of it. So what you have to do, and it takes a little bit of willpower, is to avoid the foods that the bad guys want to eat. And you just avoid simple sugars. Even, for instance, fruit juice is one of the worst things you could possibly do for your microbiome. Sorry about that. And avoid, lots of saturated fats. And you add soluble fiber to your diet. Now, that's actually pretty easy to do. Root vegetables are loaded with soluble fiber. In the good old days, our great-grandparents were eating turnips and parsnips and tubers of cassava, and you choose the culture, they were eating a bunch of tubers because they were storageable, and there was no refrigeration, there was no packing plants, there was nothing. And that contained the part of the bargain that the good guys wanted. So adding these is really important. Now, what's surprising is you can't just add those and expect much to happen. Work by the husband and wife team of the Sonnenbergs at Stanford in California, Stanford University, took people and gave them a lot of soluble fiber. In this case, it was inulin, which is a great soluble fiber. It's in the chicory family of vegetables. It's in artichoke hearts. It's in asparagus, just as an example. And they gave them inulin and looked at whether their gut microbiome got more diverse and whether their inflammation markers went down. And lo and behold, it didn't. And they go, well, what the heck? We're giving those guys what they want to eat. And come on. Well, he said, wait a minute, maybe the pump has to be primed. Maybe we have to coax them out. So the second group were given the same inulin, but this time they were given probiotic fermented foods. In this case, it was mostly kefirs and yogurts, but it could be vinegars, it could be sauerkraut, it could be kimchi. And then, and only then, did the gut microbiome diversity increase and the inflammation markers go down. And I talk about in the book why we know this happens now, but the good bacteria who are going to make great things for us, it's kind of an assembly line. And you probably need, 3, 4, 5, 6 different species of bacteria. Like an assembly line, you got to have a guy making part 1 that bacteria number 2 needs to eat to make part 3, which bacteria 3 needs to eat, and so forth, to get down to the final product. And when we used to have this wonderful, diverse tropical rainforest inside of us, that was easy to do, but most of those guys aren't around. So you gotta kind of preload the system with fermentation products. So one of the easy ways to do is, get no sugar added yogurts. I prefer goat or sheep yogurts or coconut yogurt. Get kefirs, same thing. Kimchi, sauerkraut. It's interesting. I had a patient last weekend who happens to be Korean, and we were talking obviously about her gut microbiome. And I said, do you have kimchi? And she said, oh yeah, I make it, for myself. And I said, well, why don't you just go to the grocery store? She said, oh, are you kidding? They put tons of sugar in the kimchi in the grocery store. And I said, well, what do they do that for? She said, are you kidding? Kimchi is really bitter and sour and salty. And, modern, even Koreans don't like the taste. So it's like kombucha. Kombucha is a wonderful fermentation product, but most kombucha is loaded with sugar because most people don't want that bitter, spicy taste. So I thought it was rather interesting. And this woman is in her 70s. She said, they don't make it like, I grew up, so I make my own.
Interesting. So, yeah, I mean, the gut check program is kind of comprehensive, but it's interesting what you just talked about, is you could do it in little pieces, right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, if you increase, so would there be like supplements, or should you take like psyllium husk or
psyllium husks psyllium husks are actually a great prebiotic fiber. Ground flax seeds are another great prebiotic fiber that I get a kick. Flax seeds have no lectins. That plants want you to eat flax seeds because you can't not digest them, and you will poop them out somewhere distant from the plant and start a new little family of flax plants. And so they would like you to eat flax seeds. On the other hand, most of the seeds can easily be digested. So that's when they use lectins and other plant defense compounds to make you think twice. But I get a kick out of people making these whole flax crackers and thinking it's going to do anything for them, because we have no ability to digest the outer wall of a flax seed. So they just go right on through, just the way the plant intended.
Right. So could you just talk about a couple of examples of people perhaps with autoimmune disease that you've kind of put on the gut check diet, and how has that influenced them?
Yeah, well, yeah, I can actually, I'll use myself as an example because I've written about myself. When we first started treating autoimmune patients, after my first book was published in 2007, Dr. Gundry's Diet Evolution, I described a couple of people with autoimmune disease who resolved. One was fibromyalgia, and another one was MS. And people would come to my clinic after that book, and they said, wow, what do you know about autoimmune disease? Because, I'm a heart surgeon, cardiologist by training. And I said, I don't know anything about autoimmune disease, but I'm a transplant immunologist. My lab researched how to fool the immune system. And I had to know what the immune system was looking for and how to fool it, turn it off. So I said, so I know a lot about the immune system, but I don't know anything about autoimmune disease. And I said, so if you want to play, let's play. So we started, and so we started just for fun. We got autoimmune markers, most of the common autoimmune diseases, blood tests on ourselves. And my assistant for many years comes running into me. She said, Doc, you've got lupus. And I go, come on, I don't have lupus. And she said, yeah, you do. You're positive for anti-nuclear antibody. And I'm going, that's interesting. And sure enough, I was positive. And my father's side of the family had massive psoriasis. My father was on a transplant drug, methotrexate, for 51 years of his life to control his psoriasis. It was a long time. And so I said, and there's a family history to autoimmune disease. It's small, but it's real. So I said, okay, that makes sense. And I'm always experimenting with food. So I said, I'll tell you what, I'm going to see how fast I can turn this off. So I was perfect. I didn't cheat. I didn't experiment. I just followed the yes list of foods and the no list of foods. And I rechecked myself in a month, and I was negative. My anti-nuclear antibody was negative, turned off. I went, that's pretty cool. So I didn't think much about it until I was writing another one of my bestsellers, The Longevity Paradox. And we were editing it in New York City. And we were editing on Friday. And we didn't finish in time. And I said, well, what the heck? I'll stay over the weekend and we'll finish editing on Monday and then I'll fly home. So I had a weekend to kill. I said, you know what? I'm going to see if I can reactivate my lupus. So I cheated. I had bread, I had pizza, I had tomatoes that were, had peels and seeds on them. I had pasta, I had beans, and I went back to Palm Springs and tested myself. And sure enough, my anti-nuclear antibody was elevated. In fact, it was higher than when I had tested it a couple of years before. I went, wow, that's cool. And I wonder how fast I can turn it off. So I was perfect for a week. I said, we'll just do it every week and see how long it takes. Well, after 1 week, I was negative. So what does that teach me? Number one, that I can produce an autoimmune disease in myself. Number two, it looks like I've got a pretty decent gut microbiome that does the job, but I can overwhelm it. But if I get back at it, it'll seal up very quickly. And I think really, in a way, that's the way the system was designed, that there would be occasional breakdowns in the system, but everything would fix itself fairly quickly. You'd have a bout of inflammation and then it would quiet down. What's been interesting, most of my patients with an active autoimmune disease will take 6 months, 9 months, a year to finally seal their leaky gut. And that's with trying. And I think that's just because most of us, I mean, it's a desert wasteland in terms of our microbiome from what we've done to it. And it takes a while. We have forest fires here in California, and we know that once that forest burns down, yeah, we could put little saplings of pine trees, but it's going to take 20 to 30 years to become forest again in a complex ecosystem. And it's naive, I think, for us to realize that, oh, well, I can take a round of antibiotics and take some probiotics, have a cup of yogurt, and everything will be fine tomorrow. And like I talk about in the book, there are some studies in humans that you may have single or two species of bacteria only for up to 2 years after a round of antibiotics instead of 10,000 different species. Wow.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. You got to avoid those antibiotics.
Now, don't get me wrong, they can be life-saving, but most of them are used completely inappropriately.